reflect for a moment this question. Are you a risk taker, or you fear taking risk? Are you ready to be on the safe side versus stretching yourself and experience something new? But before we begin this reflection, I invite all the men to stand up and to give your wife a big hug. So hopefully that in your risk-taking of marrying your wife, it's the right decision. Come on, guys, stand up and give your wife a big hug. That you married a white woman, right? Please give a big hand of applause. Oh, Jimmy, come on, Jimmy. This is your opportunity. You got to run up and say hello to Beth there. You can't get away with that. There you go. Truly, our life is a series of taking risk, right? Whether we decided to know someone, be friends with someone, and those of you who are married, you realize that you made that risky position and risky proposition to your spouse, and you too, as a wife, to say yes to your husband. Hopefully, it's not a series of regrets, but a series of gratitudes, right? Because in Matthew chapter 25, it's truly kind of moments of reflections and a call to discipleship. Whether we are willing to take risk, to go that extra miles that we may not be aware of what's in front of us, or to hold ourselves back, realizing that life facing forward could be very difficult. It's so true now also as we're facing the rising of the whole pandemic now. Many of us discern, especially with the upcoming Thanksgiving, what are we to do? Are we willing to take risk and be with families, or to stay back and be safe? So in Matthew chapter 25, it also, when we project it forward, or looking forward, remember Jesus in Jerusalem now. He's going to face his imminent death. So this parables of the servant may be a reflection of he himself. And will I take that final risk to die in Golgotha on that cross? Or will I going to be staying safe and preserve my life? And sometimes we at that crossroad of our life and to discern what to do and what not to do. And so in our Catholic traditions and faith, we call it discernment. But maybe in life it's all about, am I willing to take that risk? So what is it all about for you and for me? So some of the expression that we go through as whether we grow up in life and experience this life, to be aware of when to take risks or when not, but to be more cautious maybe at times. Curiosity killed the cat. Better safe than sorry. Buyers beware. When you buy a house, when you buy a car, or you go on an auction and buying something. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. So love your wife dearly. Or love your husband dearly. Or children, maybe give that great respect to your parents and not looking somewhere else. Be careful what you wish for. Or when in doubt, do nothing. And finally, you never know what lies right around the corner. So these are all expressions that help us to be safe, not to be that great risk takers at times. So ask yourself then, are you risky at making decisions that may affect your livelihood or livelihood of your family? Are you being too safe and not willing to see what's around that corner? And you keep yourself overly protected. And the same thing is true with parents. How are you bringing up your children? You know, none of us want to see a child crawl on the floor, 2 hands, 2 knees, constantly for the rest of their life. We want them to get up learn how to walk, falls, and get up again, and learn how to run. So we are already inevitably teach our children learn how to take risk and learn how to see and provide maybe a certain safe zone for them so when they do fall, they don't hurt themselves. But how far do we let go of that safe zone and how far do we pull them back? And that is it's always a hard and difficult decision for every parent to go through. Am I too controlling? Am I too rescuing in my own children? Or when do I let them go and be free? And the same thing is true with you being couples. How much controlling do you have in your own particular spouse, and how much do you trust enough to let your spouse to be free to be who they are? Here in Matthew chapter 25, are you that 5 talents that God has given to you in your own abilities? Or are you becoming that 1 talent that come and said to the owner this way? Master, I knew you were a demanding person, harvesting where you did not plant and gathering where you did not scatter. So out of fear, I went off and buried your talent on the ground. What's beautiful about this parable is to look at our own abilities. When are we ready when we are not ready to take that risk? But as you know, people who are risk takers, they don't do it that one instant of the moment. Gradually they learn what they can tolerate, what they can do or not do, and become perfection at it. And that's always easier to say than to do. But maybe looking at that person with the 1 talent, when we don't take risk, what would happen? Or when we do take risk, and what would happen? But I think the one I want to reflect upon with you is this, that sometimes we look back of our life, the different decisions that we make or we don't make. As Einstein has said here, anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new. So as we get older now, we often look back and we said, I should audition for that play. I should have gone and do that job interview. And so we keep asking that should or should not, playing in the back of your own mind. I should have married that one individual. My life would have been so different. And you keep doubting yourself even 20 years or 30 years later. But whether you are a risk taker or fear of taking risk, we have to reflect upon ourselves. Who is it that I am? That call to self is so important. And so when you call to self, then kind of re-examine, this is what will make me happy. This is what will bring about my authenticity, being who I am. What I'm able to stretch, what I'm not able to do. So nowadays, what we call it in professional world, risk assessment. What are the risk assessment if you were to make that investment of putting all your investment, all your saving into this one business? What's the risk assessment for a company to expand in Asia, for a company to expand in Africa? What's the risk assessment now with COVID-19? So risk assessment is something that helps us to know and to evaluate projections, outward, inward. What am I capable of doing and not capable of doing? And sometimes you did all that risk assessment and then you say, I'm going to do this. That's fine. No regrets. You jump forward. The hardest part is sometimes people don't do enough of risk assessment. Those of you who work in crisis centers, you do risk assessment when people call in and going through a very deep crisis in their life, whether they would take their life or not. And that's what risk assessment people do. They evaluate the condition at hand, and they look at back. What is the trends that will predict whether this person is going to commit suicide or not? And the same thing is true with your own life. When you do a risk assessment, you see then project to the futures, and there's certain things you may not know, but that risk assessment is such an important part in everything that we do. For those of you who are women here, every day you take risk, and the greatest gift that you take is your ability to have a child, knowing that your life could be at risk. Your total health will change forever. But because of you, you took that risk. Whether you realize you have that physical strength or not, you're going to do it because the gift of life is so precious to you. In doing so, you give life to me, you give life to all of us. And so the book of Proverbs truly recognizes the gift of who you are as a woman. Give her a reward for her labors, and let her works praise her at the city gates. So you become that great model for all of us when we are fear of taking that risk. May you look at children here, look at your mother, and see how much risk she's taking in her life for you. And in moments when you want to take that risk of leaving your house or running away from your house or taking your own life, step back and do that assessment. Because every company, in order to survive nowadays, even church, we need to reassess what risk will be involved or not involved. So I want to continue the gift of the great fathers of the church, the Orthodox Church. So we mentioned last 2 Sundays, St. Basil the Great, St. Athanasius of Alexandria. And today we continue with St. Gregory Nazianzus, and then eventually conclude with St. John Chrysostom. These 4 men, truly, they are risk takers in many ways. They also able to read the signs of the times, but also they also able to center themselves with our Lord, to see what ability God has given to them. So St. Gregory, a great friend of St. Basil's, they grew up also in Cappadocia. St. Gregory grew up from a noble family back in the year 370, more or less. And that friendship grew even in their adulthood in Athens, where they met up together. And this is what St. Gregory talks about, that friendship. And sometimes too, when we engage in deep, intimate friends with people that we do know or don't know, this quality bring forth for me in St. Gregory, he said. The same eagerness for knowledge motivated us, because they were both great theologians and great bishops. This was our competition, not who was first, but who allowed the other to be first. It seemed as if we had one soul in 2 bodies. It's not about who's going to be first, but who's going to allow each other to be first. St. Gregory became known in the Orthodox Church as the great theologian, the theologian, for his teachings on the Trinity, his ultimate defense against Arianism that we've been talking about the last 2 Sundays, denying the existence or the divinity of Jesus Christ. When Gregory became a bishop, he was placed by his friends Basil the Great in the small diocese, combating with a bigger diocese, with an emperor that believing, with the bishop on the other side believing so strongly in this heretical understanding that he felt his entire life was an uphill battle, pushing against the tide. He willing to take that risk, pushing against the tide because of this heretical understanding that Jesus is not the Son of God. Jesus is purely the Son of Man. And sometimes he's willing to take that risk. And so he becomes a great defender again with St. Basil's, and same thing with St. Athanasius at the Council of Nicaea. But here in Gregory, we also come to learn this aspect, what he talks about. Nothing seems to me greater than this, to silence one's sense, to emerge from the flesh of the world, to withdraw into oneself, no longer to be concerned with human things other than what is strictly necessary, to converse with oneself and with God, to lead a life that transcends the visible. So ultimately, St. Gregory said, I've done pushing and fighting against the world. I want to stay and live in the monastic life, in this ascetic life where I want to be with the Lord. And sometimes we too, at our own age, once you reach 50s, 60s, and 70s, hopefully you don't want to go that skydiving, to go jump off the plane and parachuting. Or maybe you still do. Bless you. Now maybe another time you might say, we have 3 young adults here, growing up to be a man soon. I see them from CCS now to become college graduate and work. And you have a whole potential, whole futures in front of you. So how do you do that risk assessment for yourself? Just as St. Gregory has to do for himself. Realizing, I have done enough for the church. It's time for me to draw back and to be at prayers. So ultimately, this is what he has to say in the many poetry that he wrote in his own life journey. It's a reflection for all of us when we become risk taker or fear of taking risk. Pope Benedict XVI write and describe him this way. Gregory is a man who makes us aware of God's primacy. Also speak to us, to this world of ours. Without God, man loses his grandeur. Without God, there is no true humanism. So whether you are a risk taker or fear of taking risk, may you always keep God at the centers of your souls and the centers of your life. But also to remind yourself, safety for your body may not be the safety for your soul.